Um, well, Marcia and me are kind of tag teaming this. Yeah, fun form changes. So we're not gonna go over all of them. So essentially today, just the listing agreement and the buyer's brokerage service, and then some open house stuff, because that I think, is a lot of people's questions. And then kind of start on the Form 21, because that's gonna be a bigger topic. So, yeah.
Okay, can everybody hear me out there?
Yes.
Okay, good. So the good news is that we are not, our Northwest MLS is not owned by NAR. And because they had the foresight, when did they start this? Maybe a year and a half ago, they started changing everything and evolving. And so this is kind of like the last one. And the reason this August 17th date, which is really effective August 15th, the reason that date is so important is because after that date, the Department of Licensing, when they audit, it is, there are some things that they're gonna be looking for. So please ask questions as we go along, and we certainly can do that. Today, we're just gonna look at 1A. And I found out that I always wondered why it was hard for me to find the 1A SWF. I always thought that was single white female, but it's statewide forms.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, but anyways, on that, that form should be used if you are in a NAR-owned MLS. And I never knew the difference between those before. A lot of people use them, and they have the place there to have multiple places where the listings can be, distributed to.
Oh, I definitely use that in the
I
past.
thought that's what we were coached to do, because we could put
Yeah, 'cause you could put
KW.
KWLS.
Yeah. See, and
Well, before when it was Flex, we did that, Northwest Flex, MLS, and KWLS, but. Because I don't think KWLS is not truly an MLS that we have an agreement with, so I don't think that we need to do it.
Match.
Okay, well, that answers the next question, because I don't think the 1A has a spot to enter multiple MLSs.
no,
just
it
says-
doesn't have a spot to enter multiple. So
That's fine.
anyways, that was just interesting to me. And then we'll go over the buyer brokerage service agreement. And then there was some new information in there. One of them is that because we're not owned by NAR, we can publish the seller's offer, the percentages. I was under the understanding that after August the 15th, we wouldn't be able to see that, but we're very fortunate. Because now we can, and it just helps our part to be a little bit easier.
It changes everything. It's not a guessing game.
Yes.
Just kind of really the way it was, sort of standard operating procedure,
Yeah,
which is good.
and we
I
can.
guess the commission, right? That goes downhill really fast.
Do we have any NAR owned MLSs in Washington State? Do we know if the Spokane one or?
Yeah.
There's a bunch of them.
There's
Tri-Cities.
Tri-Cities, yeah.
I think
Okay.
Yakima might be, Spokane.
Okay, so I guess if we have, well, I know in order to list stuff over there, if it was actually yours, you'd have to be a part of.
Yeah.
So yeah, because I know there is some training too on if you were to have to enter them in multiple MLSs, if one is a NAR and one isn't, but that's a whole.
That's
But
right.
The
that's
whole
just
thing.
huge that our multiple isn't part of it.
That's right.
Yeah, it makes it really nice.
Huge.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Thank
because
God. Yeah.
you are right.
Yeah.
If we were still like NCWAR and Northwest MLS, we would literally have two different forms. It's just crazy.
Mhm.
Anyways, but we're very fortunate. We do not have that. At the very end, we're just gonna talk very quickly about the changes on the Form 21 on all the purchase and sale agreements. It's just a very minor change, but it's confusing. So we'll just barely cover that, and then in 2 weeks, when we come back, then we will go through 41 or 21, all the purchase and sale agreements. 41C, they took at the escalation clause and put it onto 2 pages, and it really makes sense. It's a lot easier. And then we'll also go over if you're in an unlisted sale and you're representing the seller.
Super quick question. I just saw
Yes.
this 41C. I've never seen that before. Is that a new addendum?
Yes.
Mhm.
that's
And
the
all
new
those
form.
other asterisks?
Well, they had it
Yeah.
before, but now it's totally different.
So
So that was the one where it was like,
that was
you know-
always just in the financing, just put the seller credit, but now they have a specific credit. or
well, I
buyer
believe
credit,
that
excuse
one
me.
was like, seller. It had, what did that one have to do? Like if the seller was only offering,
So it's about commission, 41C?
yeah,
41 is
Yeah.
about to the buyer broker opposed to the other credits, which would be to the buyer.
Yeah, and it used to
It's still
have-
covered in the-
That's why
It-
it's 41,
yeah.
okay, because 41 is the buyer broker.
yeah, and it used to have like
Okay.
3 different sections, but now it's just about like if, you know, you're asking for, let's say, 2%, the listing's offering 3, the only option it has now is that the buyer gets a credit for the additional, but it used to have a bunch of different
Mhm.
options,
Mhm.
that I can't remember right now, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, so instead of next week, it will be in 2 weeks, which we'll have enough purchase and sales to really feel familiar. We'll have hotline questions to help answer, because there's a lot of this that is different. And then just to go on to the next one, then one of the things that's really important that we remember that we're going to be audited on. And that is on the listing agreement or the buyer brokerage services agreement. We need to be better about, once we have those signed, they need to be in command within 2 days. Is that business days?
Yeah.
Business days, great.
The buyer brokerage agreements do.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. And what I'm seeing in command right now is if you have a buyer brokerage services agreement, a lot of times I'll see either that or the pamphlet in the consulting part. And you only need to put them up there once. You don't need to have them on the contract side.
Yeah, I saw that on one of hers today. We thought, why is this on the contract?
can
part?
too.
We're
We'll
taking
take
that off.
I think we put that in there before
Before
because
we
it was
had
just ensuring that people were actually gonna like have it in there.
Yeah.
Cause a lot of people never went to the consulting side, they just go to under contract, so it was there as kind of like
But
a
now they're
reminder of you
mandatory.
really need
Yeah,
to do it.
But I'm seeing
take
it
it out of there.
more often, and we just need to separate those out.
Mhm.
That's before. And their phrase, well, we'll get to it when we get to the buyer brokerage. So the next slide is, if we were an NAR owned MLS, then if we had an old listing agreement, we would have to update it and get a brand new one with them seeing that. And the most important thing now that you'll see is that there are 3 different boxes, and one of the boxes has 3 different choices that we need to fill out. So I mean, we'll see that. But we do not have to renew those after, when this officially comes through. This offer, I mean, this listing agreement still offers the seller the option. It is not by law, it's just what they want to do to help sell their home. And, and as I said, our MLS will publish the compensation amount. And NAR MLSs will not. So if we, for some reason, have a client that goes to, and we're representing them, then we literally have to call and we have to ask, and it's okay. I mean, is a seller offering compensation? And if somebody that's not in our MLS calls, of course, if they can see what the compensation is, but we can share that information. Publication of the seller's compensation to the buyer brokerage firm. What I wanted to just go back over is that you can publish this in your social media or your advertising. You can, on your website or your personal website, you can put what the commission is that the seller is offering. On our yard sign, I've never heard of that, but you can put that up there that, you know, if you have a little flyer that says, buyer brokerage firm is offered 5% or whatever it is.
We start around it. on the sign.
Yeah.
In other
It's
states,
so
I'm sure they're gonna try to be real creative with this.
Yeah, or we could say, you know, to call to find out what it is. I mean, it just really depends what you want to do. If you're doing an open house flyers, you can advertise what the commission is there. And the receiving end of a phone call. So if somebody does call, we can find that out.
And you guys have the second page of the Form 1A in front, because that's the part that really changes things quite a bit with the compensation part. So this is kind of a little overview, and then I'll pull up the form for you guys on Zoom, so you can take a look at it.
So,
Should be page 2 of 1A.
if you want to go ahead and show that, then we can just walk that through.
Okay. Let
Page
me
2 of Form 1A.
Go to that. one. Did I give you the right one?
Yep.
Hopefully. That would be good. Let's see, let me share. Okay.
So the interesting thing about this is this listing firm compensation, in the training, they kept saying truffles. And they'd say either 5 truffles or 10 truffles because we're not, when we do training, we can't say, like for a residence, 6% or, you know, I mean, I don't know, they're real squirrely about that.
Yeah, in the training, they make it real weird.
Yeah, and
Um,
it just didn't make a whole lot of sense, but anyways.
We'll get there. It'll make sense.
So when
soon.
you're having the conversation about it and you talk about your services and what you provide for that, it's either the percentage of the sale price or something other, like if it's a variable, I don't like variables, but on your higher end homes, you might have that. And then the 2 I's, if the buyer is not represented, this is really important that we fill this in. If the buyer is not represented
What
by
part are we at?
II,
7A.
7A, II.
This is
Up,
Right
up,
there.
right there,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
If the buyer is not represented by a buyer brokerage firm, the listing firm compensation shall be either the percentage or the price. Just remember that I'm gonna use a percentage. So if we use 3% in I, and then we're going to have a buyer that has no representation, you know you're gonna be doing more work, and so you're gonna negotiate. So maybe I wanna do 4.5% there, or whatever the dollar figure is. But you need to put it as the total amount.
Okay.
Okay,
I'm lost.
all right. So let's say I agree to, I'm listing a house and my end of it is going to be 3% for the
3%
listing.
Goes up there.
That's right. II is if we have a buyer that does not have
So would you put
representation.
1.5 or you put 4.5 down
No,
there?
then you would put the entire
Okay,
amount.
that's where I was confused, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's how I did it,
It's
but
kind of like
then,
buyer's side dual agent. You have seller side and then you have buyer's side. That's what Pat's introducing.
Yeah,
Yeah, just to really
Yeah.
Yeah.
split it.
but this is not a dual limited dual agency. This is, all you're doing is writing up the contract and you're communicating that with them, but you're not offering them the buyers, any opinions or anything. But they just have to be, understand that, that's where that is.
Okay, so this is not if I have a listing. And then I also have buyers that I have a buyer's agreement with. It's totally
That would
separate. So
be,
then
yeah,
I
that's
am
the section.
entitled to what my listing fee is and that contract that I have with that buyer.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, so this is like if somebody walks through from an open house and they're like, I'm putting an offer in today, I just want you to write it for me, that's when this would come into play.
That's right.
Okay,
Yeah. And, you know, some people that have bought a lot of homes, they feel real comfortable, they're fine.
Mhm.
You know, if they get a good rapport with you, then that works out.
That's happening a lot on the golf course.
Okay, so I'm looking at the wrong form. Okay, so now the next section. In section B, you have 3 different boxes. Okay,
Stupid.
so
Mm.
the seller
Right.
offers, this is purely what they're gonna offer on the other side. But the majority of the times, if we check this one, then it typically, we're not like the west side. I mean, we really encourage our sellers to offer something so that their house will get sold. And so you're gonna fill I out. Then here's where you put in if the listing, if it's a II is if you were a limited dual agent. Where you bring the buyer. And then, V. The 4, the IV, then you wanna check that so that it goes to non-MLS members. Has anybody ever experienced that where they have representing the buyer is outside of our MLS? I don't know that I've ever seen that.
There's that one guy that's like only a part of state MLS out in like Jonathan something. I mean, that's probably, huh? I think so, yeah, yeah, cause I think he only does my state MLS, where that in my brain is the only time it would probably
Yeah.
apply. I can't think of anybody else that uses that.
I've
Or-
had people like listing in Ellensburg, I have agents come up from Yakima.
Oh, gotcha,
Which is different
Yeah.
analysis, which is a pain too, because the key boxes don't work either
Mhm.
for them.
yeah. It's fine, everything's fine.
So I always put a contractor box on those houses.
Yeah.
That's a good example of one. Okay, so you're gonna fill in something up there, and this is pretty normal. I mean, we're just gonna talk through with them. If you become a limited dual agent, then that's something you talk about at the very beginning.
Mhm.
And if they're okay with that, if they say, no, I don't want that, well, then at least you know. The second box, buyer to request compensation in offer. I think we're gonna start seeing more of this.
Yeah.
Where, okay, I'm telling my broker that to sell my house, I will go up to 2.5%, but I'm gonna let them offer it
Yeah, not put it anywhere.
and not put it anywhere. And so if that's the case, then there will be no offer and it will be negotiation. Or the last box is, no, I'm not paying anything. Any compensation on the buyer broker side.
Do you think that those will be added to the MLS as well? Because that'd be
It looks
really,
like it is right here, so it says request offer. Request in offer will
Oh,
be
obviously.
displayed in compensation
Okay.
section of the listing and none will be displayed.
Okay,
for
thank
those
you.
two. So
for
yes.
reading what was right.
It's a lot of words.
Because I think that that's important too, because when you see 0, Like, you don't want to just assume zero.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, none will be displayed in the compensation section of the listing.
And so that's like, if a buyer or if a seller is really not intending to.
Right.
And then you have to be careful about that conversation. When they call and ask, you can't just tell them what your seller's offering. You have to just tell them, you gotta bring me an offer.
That's right. I noticed that there's no offer of compensation. Does that mean in my offer I can't request? No, it doesn't mean that. Bring your offer and each one we'll look at.
Yeah, cause if you stack it on top of the price a little bit, they still might be
Yeah.
okay with it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think the second option is probably gonna be seen a lot more. Does anybody on Zoom have a question or understand that? So essentially just three options. Publish it, leave it open-ended, or say none. And that doesn't mean you won't get an offer that's asking for it. So, yeah, okay, sweet.
All right. And so that was the major changes on that form.
Yeah, I don't think there was much else.
So what's the like, what do we need to be doing? Say we have listings and they've signed old listing agreements that don't have these options on them. Do we need to be going back and having these conversations, or we can just lay it how it applies, or play it how it is?
It says we don't need to get new ones signed.
Right.
If I had a 0% listing, I'd probably get it re-signed and designate between the no offer or bring offer,
Yeah.
you know. But if it's a stated amount, I'd probably leave them alone,
Yeah.
because I think that's a valuable distinction on the MLS. Between the flat zero and, I don't know, send me an offer, we'll see what we can do.
Yeah, the reason that I say that is because I have a client right now that is like bouncing back and forth and they're like, take it off, put it on, take it off. And I was like, you're killing yourself here.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Let me make sure I don't have any more notes on that. Okay. Any questions out in Zoom land?
We do have, if you request compensation and an offer, how will that show up on the MLS? If you request,
Like, once it's closed?
yeah, if you can elaborate a little bit, because in the MLS, it's just gonna show if the seller's offering anything. But in your offer, that's part of the end, the Form 21 will get into, because
Oh,
that's
what
where
I'm
it
asking,
really-
what I'm asking is if you check the box that says request compensation in the offer. So what will that say?
Oh, gotcha.
Or, right, on the MLS, it won't say none. What will it say?
It will say, quote, request an offer, unquote. Did you hear that?
Yep.
Okay, sweet.
Sounds like there'll be some new.
Some
sort of box in there.
Why does my other thing just keep going away? Okay, there it is.
Oh, and go back to that one. There was something in red and I just want to make sure. Oh, yeah, we talked about that.
If they're unrepresented.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you need to put the total amount if
Okay.
you're going to represent them. Okay.
Did you wanna go to 41?
Yes.
Okay, so let me pull this up first and share it. Sorry, Zoomers, I'm going to have to share and unshare a million times, so it's fine. Okay, sweet.
Okay, so item 5 is compensation and the choices are percentage or amount, and that's pretty much like what we're doing. If you represent both the buyer and the seller, you will fill that in. If not filled in, compensation will be the same as 5A. So on that one, it's really important that you add, if you are, you're doing a buyer brokerage services agreement, and in the event that it's your listing and you're going to be representing both, then you need to make sure that not only do you get, like on the buyer's side, let's say 3%. And if you're going to be on both sides and it's your listing, then you let them know what that compensation total amount is going to be. Otherwise, it will revert back to 5A. And C, shall we show that?
Yeah,
Where are we on the forms? We're on 41.
yeah, so I'll pull it up right now.
Number 5 on the page 1.
Oh, on the buyer broker, okay.
So, let me get to it.
Or other.
5 goats. Not gonna see 5 goats from my buyer brokerage services.
Are you starting a farm?
Well, actually, yes, we are getting goats.
Oh, fun. Okay,
Probably in the spring.
so.
Not imminently.
Here.
Okay, so but this is not, okay, so the way that I'm reading this. If the buyer broker is limited dual agent representing both the buyer and the seller, then the compensation shall be equal to the amount in 5A.
If you don't fill in below that.
So it'd be the exact same when you're doing more work, so you want that to be higher than your section A.
So it's pretty much the same as on that other form, on the.
Yeah,
list
that part,
agreement.
I think the biggest change on this one is just where it talks about if the seller's offering more than what's in
Oh,
this
that's B,
agreement.
okay, I'm sorry, I missed the B, I was reading that as part of A.
Oh,
So that's
gotcha.
choice B, I see.
Yeah, so you want to make sure that you talk to them
Yeah.
about it um, and I still think that when we're doing a limited dual agency, I still think a Form 42 is a good deal to do because it has both the buyer and the seller and it has everybody's signatures on it that they're agreeing that.
No question that they've all.
Yes, yes,
Is that the agency disclosure
yes.
one? Gotcha.
And like,
Yeah.
how does this work if you're referring off, right? Like, I don't want dual agency. I have a buyer broker thing. I'm also doing the seller, but I want to refer this off. Like, I don't want the liability of dual agency. Now they need to get a new buyer broker agreement from the agent I referred to. Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds like, I needed to talk that out.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If I have a buyer broker agreement with a buyer.
Yeah.
And they want to buy one of my listings,
Mhm.
but I don't want to do dual agency because I don't want the liability
Yeah.
and I want to refer this to another agent.
Mhm.
I'm not in any sort of conflict because I already have an agreement with them.
No.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Well, anything.
Because I have
You've
already signed it with them, so are you breaking your contract by saying, no, I wanna refer you out?
Agent.
Yeah, and you have a duty of confidentiality, so anything that would like harm their position with your current sellers, like you wouldn't actually legally be able to share, so no, there's no conflict, right?
I mean, I don't know. I guess I need.
Basically, she's saying she's not gonna work with the buyers anymore, she's gonna refer them out, but she already has a signed agreement with them, so if she breaks that, is it okay to say, sorry, I'm gonna refer you to someone else?
Yes.
She's not a dual agent anymore, so it goes back to different commissions.
Yeah,
You should get a referral on the selling side.
you fill out your referral form for the percentage that you want from the other person you're referring it to. And they will need to fill out a buyer's.
Yeah, I think she was just worried about, cause I have
Contract
her
with
responsibility
the
to her client that she's already got a
And
signed
this
contract for.
specifically states that it expires in blank days. But, I mean, I think like theoretically and logically, I'm doing the best for them as possible, but I don't know.
Well, I think there's also that buyer brokerage services addendum or
Yes,
amendment.
where you
just put
cancel.
Cancel his.
Yeah,
Well, you could
Cancellation
also choose on the limited dual agency, you could choose for them to not acknowledge that, like, if you are uncomfortable, like, just writ
That's
large
fine.
being a dual agency, don't have them sign that. And then if they wanna see one of your listings, you say, I'm not, you have not authorized me to be your dual agent, I don't want to be your dual agent, so I
Yeah.
refer you.
Okay.
So if you just don't wanna do that
There you
ever,
go.
don't
That's a
have
good
sign
idea.
that, yeah.
Okay. Everybody in Zoom land get that?
Me and my what if world.
No, that's
No, that was
good.
a very good question, though.
Yeah.
Not seeing anything in the chat, so think we are good. So I know before, this form always confused me with the listing agreement because before they kind of separated it out more. I always got confused on how to say it, because in your listing agreement, it would say, if I'm a dual agent, then I want this percentage. But then on the buyer's agency, it said, if I'm a dual agent, I want this percentage. And it used to function like those, you wouldn't put the total on the listing agreement. Those would kind of just be combined.
Be like his attorney.
And now you have to show the total amount.
For both sides.
Yes.
Totaled. Okay.
Yes. So if it's my listing
Mhm.
and and you are the buyer and you say, I want you to represent me,
Mhm.
then I have to go into a listing agreement with you.
Mhm.
And then
Which is the, yeah, total that's on there.
and it would go by what the total amount is.
Mhm. Okay, because it just, this section just is compensation, because it's not listing broker compensation and then buyer broker compensation. On the other form, where then they become combined, you're kind of separating it. Now it's just, here's the total.
So one of the things that this new section on the buyer brokerage services agreement, it's deleted the buyer's advance consent
Where
to
is that?
compensation sharing between the firms. I never did get that because escrow always took care of it.
Is that on here?
No.
Oh, it's not on there,
No.
okay.
Yeah. It's just one of the things that they're cleaning up. Okay. Any more questions on that? Okay, what's the next slide talk about? Because in here, I wanted to really go over the open houses and what does that mean?
Well, let's see on this one. Well, do you want to talk about this part a little bit more, how it prohibits?
Okay, new boilerplate prohibits the buyer brokerage firm. Let's see what that is. From receiving more compensation than identified in item 5.
Why do we have to do that on Tuesdays? It's like every Tuesday.
Yeah, can you guys hear what this stupid leaf blower guy? It's like 2 weeks. I know,
Pick
it's
them
like,
up.
not the neighbor. Kelly, go tell him to leave. Just throw down the hammer.
Okay.
He'll
So
be
you
down
have
in a minute.
somebody that has a
Oh.
fire sale and they want to offer 5%. And the buyer broker has signed an agreement for 2.5% or 3%. Then that does not automatically get sent to the buyer broker firm. It says, if the seller offers more than the buyer owes, to the broker, buyer broker cannot take the overage.
Okay, I was trying to find that the whole time.
So
So,
this is what just changed, like the last.
yeah,
week.
this is the biggest
Yeah.
thing, I think. So, yeah, if seller's offer is greater than the compensation, so this is section 6.
A seller may, go ahead and read it out loud because you're closer to the.
Okay, a seller may, but is not required to, offer compensation to firm for representing buyer in the purchase of seller's real property. Seller's offer, if any, shall be stated in the purchase and sale agreement. Buyer may request that the seller pay the compensation to firm as part of buyer's offer, and buyer shall pay any amount of the compensation not paid by seller. If seller's offer is greater than the compensation as part of buyer's offer, buyer may request that the amount of seller's offer that is greater than the compensation be credited to buyer.
Okay, So somebody really it's an estate sale, the kids are fighting and they want to get it done, so they're gonna offer 5%. And you've signed a buyer brokerage that you're gonna do 3%. Doesn't automatically go to the buyer brokerage.
The 2% difference.
Yeah.
So you can't get 5.
Does
You get
not.
3.
So if you're showing somebody that house and you notice that, then you can sign an amendment to your buyer brokerage service, changing the percentage for that particular one. But you do have to have documentation for that. And then that allows it then for the difference then to go to the buyer brokerage.
Well, and I don't really know how that conversation with the buyers would go.
That's what I'm
Cause
saying.
it's like, you have an agreement with me to pay 3, but oh, this one's offering 5, so I want 5. Like, that sounds
Well, I
like
mean,
a
if it's
conversation.
offering 5, it's probably for a reason. It's probably something really hard to sell, right? Like, we offer 5% on land that's like hard, like doesn't have any way in. You gotta like download a map on your phone. Like, it's more
Mhm.
difficult. It takes a lot of feasibility. It's like a lot more logistics. So if I had an actual reason, to tell the buyer like, hey, we started looking at houses and like, I was cool with 3%, at that because houses are more straightforward, it's less work. If we're doing land now, these guys are offering 5% to compensate me for all of my additional work
Mhm,
with trying to understand this vacant land and go through all the feasibility. So if there's some kind of like
mhm.
actual reason, then
Mhm.
that'd be a great conversation.
Yeah, that's a great way to word it.
Yeah,
And
if
there
it's
is,
just willy-nilly, I mean, I'd probably try to bullshit my way into like, well, this is a very complicated house. The age, we've got lead-based paint we need to deal with, we should test for asbestos, we need to do a sewer scope, this is a much more complicated house.
yeah.
Than the average one.
You are good, Sydney, you are good.
Well, and it's like, I'm sure there's some sort of like, you can't write an offer, get it accepted, and then do that amendment.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some, you're gonna have to do it before you're even writing an offer to make it really clear, like, we had the conversation, I'm not just like
Yeah,
sneaking her in there,
totally.
you know? Well, I guess you have to, cause of how the Form 21 is filled out now.
And if the difference then goes to the seller, to the buyer, toward closing costs and everything, and it's allowed by the lender, then, because then you would use a 41C.
Oh.
Yeah, so the 41C, yeah, completely changed. And do you want me to skip to that one or?
Sure.
Okay, so,
Yeah, give me a glimpse.
yeah, so that's the biggest thing
So
of if
don't do
it's
the
more.
34 and write it in.
Correct. So yeah, if the amount is more, then it's credited to the buyer, and then that's when we do the 41C. Where are you, my friend? It's in here, right? I think
believe
it's
so.
in here. Oh, there's so many of them.
There we go.
41C, okay.
Oh,
let
wow,
me
it's a lot simpler
share.
looking.
Yeah, there's like
There used to be a lot
no,
more options
Yeah.
on there.
yeah, and I kind of want to go back and see the options that there used to be. That might actually be helpful. So, yeah, that's all it shows.
The difference between the amount of seller's offer to the buyer brokerage firm compensation and the amount to be paid by the seller shall be credited to the buyer's obligations at closing. If a buyer is obtaining a loan or loans to purchase a property, seller's credit to buyers is subject to buyer's lender's approval. Any amount not approved by the buyer's lender shall be either applied as a reduction in the purchase price, which is kind of cool, or credited to the seller. And if neither box is selected, then it goes back to the seller.
Kind of weird how they don't actually ask for an amount. They're just like, they're
Just the
leaving.
difference. Well, because they're referring
You
to 21, right? Because the amount will be referenced on.
Yeah.
You want to be crystal clear about what that amount would be personally,
What would you put in other?
and you could just put that in parentheses or
They're gonna
something.
donate it to a.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cash.
Let me just see, because I don't know that right off the top of my head.
It just doesn't seem, it seems
Can
like
we
it's
go
pretty
back to the first
straightforward.
page?
There wouldn't be
Page
another.
21, have we gone over 21 yet?
That one we were gonna do last,
Can you
which is,
pull up the first page though? I'm curious, like with this, because like it has to be referring to this, so.
yeah, so it's this section here.
So I feel like
Yeah.
this is missing something, because the addendum for buyer credit is, oh, okay, seller offer if any amount to be paid by seller. Okay, so that's a change that makes a lot more sense, because currently, like, it refers to addendum, but we don't have an addendum if they're offering lower than the amount your buyer brokerage is.
Mhm.
So that fixes that problem.
Yeah,
Oh, that's new too. When did that start happening?
well, this is what's gonna be on the 17th.
Oh, okay. They
Yeah.
haven't released this form yet.
Correct.
Got it.
Yep. This is the big change. This is the fun one where they use all the chocolate truffle examples that we'll get to. Yeah, so we'll get there in like five minutes. It's gonna be fun. Does anybody on Zoom have questions? Nope, okey dokey. Let's see here, so. I'm gonna go to what the. I don't wanna go to what the. 41C looks like now, cause I kind of forget what all those options were. Okay, so.
Yes, a lot different.
Yeah, so it used to be when there's no compensation offered, which now that box of what seller's offering fixes that. Additional buyers obligated to pay more. So now that fixes that because in the offer, you're gonna put what you want. Credit to buyer, that's what was left. So, yeah, I mean, it's super simplified, it is what it looks like. And you'll understand that
And
more
none
in a
of
minute.
those, like, yeah, had any like way to add your compensation, so it was like
Mhm.
that addendum didn't really help
Mhm.
in those cases, so anyway, yeah, I think it's all good changes.
Okay, so. Let's see, so we had 41. Let's see, any seller's offer will be stated. Buyer will not pay any amount not paid by. Important notes.
So the Form 41, even if you already have one, then it has to be updated? Is that what I'm reading under the notes?
Oh,
Yeah, all Northwest MLS brokers
Okay,
must
so we need
update
to redo
Form
all of our
41.
buyer brokerage.
unless it's pending.
So if I just put in an offer and I don't get pending until after 15, for my buyers, I gotta renew it.
Of course. It can't be easy, you know, that's not how it works.
And so, what affects us that, the NAR Code of Ethics that we have signed on to, before touring a home with a buyer to whom the broker is providing services, recommends that you have a buyer brokerage services agreement. That's the NAR. The Washington law, which trumps that, before or as soon as reasonably, I didn't type that in, practical, after commencing service.
Basically, as soon as possible.
Yeah, so if you are doing an open house and you're doing it for somebody else, it's not your open house and a buyer comes in, you can give them a tour. But if they want more information, if they're starting to ask you about financing, if they're starting to ask about the process, then you need to fill that out and just say, I just need to get a buyer brokerage services agreement signed between us. And let me explain what that means. And we can say,
And then we can go forward.
yeah, and then we can say it's the law. I think Amanda was the example that when she bought property in Idaho, they just said, for me to move forward, I just need to have this signed and have this agreement between us. So in an open house, if you are the listing broker, you may show the seller's home to all prospective buyers without entering into a buyer brokerage service agreement, because you have an agreement with the seller a little caveat there is that you let them know that you're representing the seller. And there's information you probably can't share with them that's, that's confidential, but you'll be happy to answer any questions that you can about the property. If another broker is showing your listing and has an open house, and if you have included them in your listing agreement as an additional broker, then they can show the buyer, just like you, without, but they need to let them know that they're representing the seller. If the buyer broker calls the listing broker may show the property and provide unlimited information to any buyer at any time without having to sign an agreement, because you have the listing agreement. But if the listing broker enters into an agreement with the buyer, the listing broker is no longer the seller's exclusive agent, but a buyer's agreement agent. And that's where you need to get them to, that's where I think the Form 42 is very important, that all parties sign it and understand that you are in a limited capacity. And if you have, if I have a listing and Sydney says, can I do an open house for you? And I say, yes, then she's not representing the seller. The NAR Code of Ethics says that they must show the host before. Oh, shoot.
Shit, why is it going the other direction? Hold on. Okay, there you go, right here.
Before they go through and show them that. We don't, but it allows us to show it. And then if they're interested and they want to make an offer and they want to move forward, then we can get the services agreement. However, it needs to be always before you write up the offer, always. Any questions on that open house? Yeah. Okay.
So let's see, best practices. Okay, yeah, if they want additional services, you do your
So
normal stuff.
there are other things that we can do, if they want it, gee, is this comparative to other houses in this neighborhood? I think Wenatchee's a lot easier to do that than in Lake Chelan. If you are starting to give them information about lending and stuff like that, just ask them. I really would feel more comfortable if we have a buyer brokerage services agreement. And let me explain what that means. And then that allows me by law to really step in and just be totally in your corner.
And I like the option if somebody's just weird about it, like, I don't want to sign anything. It's like, okay, we're just gonna do it for this address.
That's right.
So it's, yeah, very
You can-
simple, or
you
for
can make
2
it,
days.
and you can
know.
make it
Perfect.
non-exclusive, and you can make it just for that, that address.
Yeah,
So
not
this
married to
agreement-
each other.
You would just change the expiration date or something, or how would you put that
So on
on
the
here?
first page, it has the terms, like, I think the default's 90 days is what the agreement's for. You can just write in a day, 2
Oh,
days.
gotcha.
And then at the top, there's space for the area.
Mhm,
So you can just put in a
Put the address.
specific,
mhm.
yeah.
And I think that if you're doing open houses, I think to have some blank ones ready,
I would,
Mhm.
yeah, so that you can just
Don't
go
let 'em get
for
away
it.
from you.
Yeah,
She's compliant.
okay. Let me see, did we
So-
cover?
Well, this one, should the buyer's brokerage services agreement be given to
Oh,
the seller?
yes.
And Annie has a video on that, on the Washington Realtors, YouTube page as well.
So it is interesting to me that I get these with the offers all the time. They should not. First of all,
It's not
it's
the
not
seller's
anybody's business except
Mhm.
for the consumer and the broker and the brokerage. So don't submit it when you submit an offer. that isn't
And it
necessary.
doesn't say at the top that it's a part of the purchase and sale, all the
That's
stuff
exactly
that's
right.
supposed to be in those offers says that.
If for some reason the seller requests a copy of the buyer, I'm not really sure when that would happen, but
Oh, why? Yeah.
Why would they care?
yeah.
Mhm.
Discuss it with your buyer, and if they have no objection, or if there's any information in there, you can redact it, but you can share it. There's no reason to deliver,
The buyer brokerage to escrow the lender.
yeah, usually, typically that's, yeah,
Mhm.
I don't think so, but
Yeah.
anyways, that was one of the points.
Yeah, the
Um,
only reason escrow is gonna care, which we use a different form, is when the buyer's gonna be paying a portion of your commission if the seller isn't offering enough. So, yeah, this doesn't matter to them. There's a whole different form. No questions.
Okay, so, this is not in the order that I have.
Did you wanna do a different one?
No, just go to the next one. Yeah, because I want to end on this one.
So that's all we had for that one.
Yeah, and, the compensation is still the same as it relates. They have a special form in here that, your escrow will, ask you to fill out, but KW has a special compensation thing already. All the escrow companies are already ready.
And I'll pull up this 40A in a second.
Okay. So our process remains the same. You enter the request into command, it automatically goes to Kelly, and then she sends it to escrow.
Yep.
And then if there's special circumstances, then you need to make sure that she understands that. If part of it is to be paid by the buyer, part of your buyer brokerage compensation,
Then that's when this applies and you have the 40A filled out.
and the 40A would be the way to be able to do
So
that.
it doesn't change anything in command, that just goes to escrow to give them
And I'll,
instructions.
yeah, I'll show the 40A here. So why is it making it so difficult for me to find my forms? So 40A, let me go to Express, because this is a form we already have. So let's say if the seller is offering two, but your buyer's agency agreement says three, then what, let me share again. So what this form is compensation disbursement form buyer funded. So this is saying, here's the date, buyer, seller, the listing, and then buyer shall pay blank dollar amount. It doesn't have percentage on there, so you need to do the math. For the buyer, funding the buyer brokerage firm's compensation, buyer shall deliver the foregoing funds to closing agent no later than the closing date. So there's no way in command to be able to put like, commission's 3%, buyer's paying 1% of it. That's not something that the system does. So if your buyer's paying anything, essentially you have to fill this out, buyer signs it, and then it gets given to escrow. So escrow knows when they get our commission broker demand that, oh, okay,
Where
here's
to
the
take the
total
money
amount
from.
the buyer's agent is getting, but we need to take this amount from the buyer. So if they don't have this form, they don't know. It
At
just, it's
closing,
not
yeah.
an amendment like in the offer on a 34 or anything. It's just on this because your buyer's agency agreement or buyer brokerage services agreement, it's a mouthful.
It is.
I hate that. So that makes it clear, but they don't need that. This form tells them what to do. Make sense?
Okay, and then the last one is on the, if you can go to Form 20.
21.
Mhm. And we'll just talk about that real quick.
Jesus. Okay. Let's skip it. Okay. Form 21.
Okay, so item 17, this is what it's gonna look like. And it will auto-populate if they have a percentage that they're offering.
And that's this first, oh, it keeps highlighting sample, this first little section, so, seller's offer, if any.
That will come up, the first blank is if their offer. And the second blank is the amount the buyer wants the seller to pay for the buyer brokerage compensation goes in the second blank.
And those are either percentages or dollar amounts? Okay.
And you have, both boxes need to be filled out on all offers. So even though it says if any, like, yeah, if the seller's offering 0, you put 0. And then amount to be paid by seller is what you're asking for.
Okay.
But
Okay,
yeah.
But if you're fine with the seller's offer, then you put like $2,000 and then $2,000, so they're gonna be. Okay.
Yeah, so they,
Okay.
so they match. So the main thing is just both boxes have to be filled out. You're never gonna have one that's blank.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Helpful to know.
So, like, if, seller is offering 2. And, well, let's see, so if seller's offering 3. And your buyer's agency agreement only says 2, then that's 2 would be over here. So seller's offers 3, amount to be paid by seller is 2. That's when you would click this addendum for buyer credit box, because you have that difference where the seller's offering more.
Yeah.
And we looked at that 41C and they made it much easier to look at.
Let's see. Okay, so both boxes must be filled in on all offers. First one is seller's offer, second blank is amount buyer wants seller to pay. And then we have the 48, okay.
So what if the seller offers 2 and the buyer wants 3?
So that's when, I mean, you would put that offer in there of, hey, seller, we want 3. It's up to them if they want to accept that or not.
So you'd have 2 on this blank and 3 on that blank?
And that's the negotiation part. That's why it's really important on this new revised form that both boxes, both blanks are full.
So if seller's offering 2, you asked for 3. If the seller accepts that, great, then it's 3. If the seller says, no, we're only paying 2, then you have this where he's only paying 2, your buyer's agency agreement says 3. So that's when you're gonna get that 40A sign saying buyer's paying this extra 1%. Or there's that amendment portion of it where you could amend your buyer's agency agreement to go from 3 to 2. So, yeah. And you kind of would want that beforehand, but it's not really possible in that sense if they counter back and don't agree to it. Okay. Do you want me to go to those weird examples with the truffles?
Yeah, if you want to.
If you wanna play.
With the truffles. Okay, so can everybody on Zoom see my Canva thing? And my video panel is hidden, so I can't see you guys. Okay, Lois, can you see this completing Form 21, line 17
Yes,
thingy? Cool. Love that. Okay, so present, full screen, present. Okay, so buyer and broker enter a buyer's agreement that broker will be paid 5 chocolate truffles. Buyer finds property where seller is offering 10 chocolate truffles. How would you complete the Form 21? I know, it's funny.
I didn't mean to giggle out loud.
So, oh, it totally makes sense. So the seller is offering 10. So there's two ways of filling it out. So seller's offering 10, amount to be paid by seller is 5, because your agreement says 5. Because the seller's offering more, then you check the addendum for the buyer credit. If the lender will allow, that much of a credit. Or they say this other, it does the same thing. You just need to make sure you're not doing both. So the other option is you put seller's offer is 10 truffles, amount to be paid by seller is 5. Instead of selecting this addendum for buyer credit, on your Form 22A financing agreement, on paragraph 3, where that's where it says the credit portion.
The top
Um,
of page 2, yes.
Yeah, the top of page 2, you would then just put the difference in there. So it does the same
A
thing,
different form.
essentially. I mean, in reality, you could do either one, because if you already have the financing addendum in there, it's pretty easy to just put the
Mhm.
difference in there rather than adding a whole nother form to your
Cause you'll
offer.
know what their offer is.
Yeah,
You'll know that, and so your 22A, then that's where you put the other 5 truffles. And that's why when you're reviewing something with your client, if you're representing the seller, that you really make sure that you understand, that they understand, okay, we offered 10 truffles and the buyer brokerage firm is going to be paid 5, and the additional 5, they're asking to help on the loan,
mhm,
on that loan provision.
yeah. So yeah, if you get in that situation to where this buyer can't get that much of a credit because of their loan type. I mean, I don't know if it would ever be that much of a difference. I don't know if a seller would offer that much more.
Would you just reduce the purchase price then if they can't get that much credit from the lender?
You could, yeah, there's all there, you can do, yes.
Okay, so the other option is if the seller's offering 5 truffles, your buyer's agency agreement, that's what I call it, that just sounds
Yeah.
simpler. Says 10 truffles, then that's how you fill this out, is it's always, here's what the seller's offering, whether it's 0 or, 5.
Whatever it is.
And then the amount to be paid by, the seller, you're asking for 10, so they can agree to that. And if they don't agree to it, then that's kind of when you get into that buyer paying their portion. So you enter a buyer's agency agreement that you will be paid 10 truffles. Buyer finds property where seller's only offering 5 truffles and buyer does not want to ask the seller to pay more, buyer will pay the difference. So on here, since they don't want to ask the seller for more, which yeah, that could hinder your offer if you're in like a multiple offer situation, then they just want to make their offer better and just do 5 and pay the other themselves. So that's where you would deliver, whoops. You would deliver Form 40A to escrow so that escrow knows part of that money's coming from your buyer. And then you do the commission part as usual, which is the total commission in command. Makes sense to everybody on Zoom? Pretty straightforward, just more stuff. Okay, so next week we'll go into it, or 2 weeks from now, we'll go into it more because they also had some interesting examples in the training Marcia did of on your buyer, like your buyer's agency agreement, if you wanted to have variable, like the commission you're gonna pay me is this much up to this purchase amount. And then if the price is higher, then you'd pay me this much. I mean, there's ways to make it different. I mean, it doesn't need to be just 2-3%, whatever, regardless. So you can kind of tier it, and they gave examples of how to do that language. So a little, I don't know how many of us would get into that
Well, it's good to know
situation.
that it's available,
Yeah.
and then, we can all dig it up if we have to.
Mhm.
And also, after the 15th, these new forms, some of them say on the upper right-hand side will say revised 8/20/24, or on the left side at the top under the form number, it will say revised like your Form 1A now.
824 right there.
Yeah,
Yeah, let me.
and then there'll be, and so after the 15th, then in compliance, I'll be looking at those things. And also when you submit your offer.
Make sure they have the correct form.
That's correct.
Well, the MLS, I don't think is gonna let you try, I mean, that's why if you just go through transaction desk and do your offers in there, it's automatically gonna
You
have
can't
the
help
new
but have the
ones.
Yeah,
I've never played around with like DocuSign or any of that, where it's like if you have to download it before to fill it out, I don't know
That just seems like so much more work.
that whole thing.
Yeah.
So, and then, yeah, you just do, express forms is gonna be updated. I don't know if they're gonna have manuals right away to help.
and
That might
that,
take a
that's
bit.
one of the reasons why we're gonna do about 2 weeks. So as you go through and you experience this, if you would send emails to copy both Ashley and I, then we can make sure that we cover your question on, what date is that?
Is it or what
20th,
are you
uh,
talking about?
the 2 weeks, let me just see.
Oh, the 27th, when
The
we're having the
27th.
next. Um,
Is it next week, the 20th, for the guy from Northwest MLS is
Yeah.
gonna be here?
yeah,
Yeah.
so that's why it's just, yeah, we have a guy from the Northwest MLS coming in to teach more about pulling statistics from, Matrix
To help
In
with
real
your offers
estate
and things like that.
info. Yeah, just more data stuff. And then on the 27th, we'll do the, contracts again,
Mhm, yes.
so.
And we'll have opportunity then for a lot of questions in the hotline and experience to be able to see. Now, last weekend I had 5 offers. I mean, 2 weekends ago, there were 5 offers in our office. Last weekend, I think there was 1. So it's like a wave. So
Yeah.
we're gonna, unfortunately, if your date on the upper left-hand corner is 8:15 or more, you need the new forms.
Mhm.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm just, we are all in the same
I
boat
mean, it
here.
seems like they're trying to make it a little more clear, but it just has so much more verbiage in order to clear it up. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's, yeah, they're really trying to make clear this is what the seller's offering, here's
Yeah.
actually what you're getting paid. So I'm interested to see how other agents are going to like counter back. You know, cause if it says like seller offers 2, we ask for 3, they're not okay with doing 3 and just 2, like what are their responses gonna look
Mhm.
like?
Is it gonna be like an email or?
Well, no, in the offer, like, cause I mean, every agent is different. Are they gonna use a counter offer, reference that section and say seller to only offer 2?
yes, and that's a great comment.
Yeah, cause I just I'm trying to think through, if the seller doesn't wanna pay what you're asking for, how are we gonna see that?
The seller counter, yeah. It just real quick, because we still have some people on there, please make sure if you don't fully agree with the offer and you're representing the seller, that you put all your changes onto a Form 36. And I think Lois had this, where they took her counteroffer, which was filled out correctly, and then they marked through it,
Scribbled all over it.
and then they initialed it, and it was a mess.
Well,
And so she just redid it. And that does mean
Makes
that
sense.
everybody has to sign it, and
mhm.
you do run the risk of losing it, but it's clear.
Yeah, and if you talk to the agent beforehand and it's like, yeah, for, compliance, we're agreeing, I'm just cleaning it up, and then it's not a nightmare for escrow and everybody in our
Everything left
brains.
To the imagination, cause you can't tell for sure what they
That's
crossed
right.
off or what they didn't.
Ambiguity is
Yeah.
attorney's best friend.
Yeah.
So the next, yeah, so the next, on the 27th, then we'll talk about the seller's counter. How can the seller counter that? And what does that look like?
Mhm.
I'll make sure that we have that information. Okay,
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure on our end, we'll do it right with a, counter and just change it, but I'm sure we're gonna see red lines and initials and 34s and the whole shebang.
Mhm.
So it'll be fun. We'll see what other people
We
do.
just have Marcia to go teach classes to all these different firms.
No, they just come here and learn what they are supposed to do. It's baffling.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Marcia.
Good to see you,
Thank
Lois.
you. And thank you.
Great
Ash-
seeing you guys too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marcia.
See you
Thanks,
later.
Ashley.
Bye.
Bye.